Farmville Church of Christ. This is the day
The Lord has made.
I will rejoice
And be glad in it.
Let's stand up.
Deep down inside my heart, that's where my suffering starts. With just bright shining as the sun. We know as days to sing God's praise, that when we first begun. Hallelujah, praise my rain falls down on
Miss Jones was trying to get her 7th grade class, her history class, to understand how the Indians must have felt when they first encountered the Spanish explorers. She reached out to Bobby in a classroom and she said, "Bobby, how would you feel if someone strange showed up at your front door? Someone who looked very different, spoke another language, and wore unusual clothing. Wouldn't you be a bit frightened?" Bobby looked at her with a smile and said, "No, I figure it's just one of my sister's dates, so." Another dose of impulsive response that I think helps to deal with some of the realities of life. And when these truths emerge, then sometimes they either turn out to be completely true, and sometimes maybe not so much. It's kind of like what we used to say when we were growing up: you can't judge a book by its cover. Maybe a wonderful human being from the inside. And while all of that is not so bad on some occasion, responding quickly, as you well know, to many conversations or to certain situations can have some very interesting consequences, either good or bad. Now, I have found, personally, that when I am quick to speak, when I am slow to listen, or when I respond in anger to any given statement, I do not have time to give it to the Lord. As a matter of fact, the Lord probably is the furthest thing from my mind. We can get sidetracked. We can get distracted. And sometimes, either depending on the situation or the words that have been spoken, there are times when probably all of us have felt a bit justified in being able to feel like we need to say something, even if that justification seems very real to us. And what happens most of the time is that the Lord is completely left out of the entire equation. And He's not consulted in any way, fashion, or form. As a matter of fact, probably guilt then becomes the greater dominant emotion within you after the fact, post-conversation. And then, like all of us have done on occasion, after something has been said, particularly if it's inflammatory, we go back to our hiding place, to our man caves, to our homes, wherever we go. And we look deep into our heart. And there's the common words. Man, I wish I wouldn't have said that. This morning, James deals with a subject that I believe is commonplace to us all. And I must warn you that if you will listen very carefully to what James is about to give you, you might start to see things from a little different perspective. These should not be new words to you, but they are commonplace, I think, among us as we are readers of God's Word, or at least you've heard them said. Would you turn with me to James chapter 1? As we continue in our James series, we're in chapter 1 and we begin with verse 19 this morning. And I want you to listen to these words, and I think this is a typical series sermon as we get into this that is so easy to take a look at, and it follows along the line of the series, and our tendency is to allow this to go in one ear and right out the other. Or even be complimentary at the back door and say, good sermon, preacher. But I must warn you that the Lord has given you this message. I'm nothing more than a spokesperson. Listen to what James says. My dear brother and my dear sister, I want you to take note of this. This is what James says, verse 19. I want you to take note of what you're about to receive. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. For man's anger does not bring about the righteous life that God desires. And we really can't get much past that. I suppose it's maybe, as some have stated, a sign of the times. National epidemics are now emerging, even as we started to point out last Sunday in our series, that people are beginning to look at our nation from a much different perspective. And you remember one of those epidemics that is now emerging throughout the nation is this: wrong is right and right is wrong. People and special interest groups are allowed to spout off with regard to their agendas and to their beliefs, and it doesn't matter where they're at. As a matter of fact, they pop up in some very peculiar places. People are offended by just about everything. And no thought is given to how any of this might affect people, particularly people around them. And God help them if they say anything in rebuttal. And I believe we are now starting to see a national epidemic with regard to this. We are majoring in the minors. Even during the Super Bowl. Unbelievable. The media made a really big deal with regard to Eli Manning's expression on his face when his brother won the game. Are you kidding me? Have we reduced ourselves to this kind of exposure? Hey, newsflash! If there were ever a time to listen to some wise and godly counsel in this nation, it is now. People need to wake up, and they need to understand that God has something to say about all of these things. And here's the crazy part about it. James has a solution. But we're not geared that way, are we? We are not geared to be solution-based people. We're reactionary. We're not proactive, we're reactionary because we respond after the event has taken place. And we've got something to say about that. But James takes a proactive approach here, and he says, I have a solution. And if you will allow this solution to become a permanent part of your life, I promise you, you will begin to see things from a much different perspective. What's he talking about? Let's look at it. Verse 19, he says, every one of us, every single one of us should be, and he lists three things: quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Let's address those three. People in this nation are rising up in droves and are saying some very inflammatory things. And it is really hard to avoid them all, because they're in society, they're in schools, they're on the TV sets. You can't avoid all of them. And it's really hard not to be reactionary with regard to sometimes some really stupid statements, or like this media exposure goes, well, what was Eli thinking? Who cares what he was thinking? That's his brother. Let the two of them, if there's a fight, let them fight it out. We don't need the nation fighting the Mannings. Good for Peyton. Good for Peyton. I hope he retires. And it's fascinating to me to look at all of these things. We as a nation are rising up in droves and saying some inflammatory, stupid things. And everybody here knows that. And what happens as a result of all of these things? I don't need to tell you, because you already know. Anger and frustration are felt by many people all across this nation because of many of these statements. Provocation, accusations, personal attacks are fuel for their fire. Now here's what's crazy about all of this. Notice in James' solution-based words that none of this has to do with the people who say or react to a whole host of different subjects. As you well know, and we can say it in unison, can't we? People are people. They are going to spout off about whatever, whether you like it or not. But notice, and here's where it gets interesting, because this is actually part of the challenge. Notice that the emphasis of this passage and of this verse isn't upon all these stupid, ridiculous observations or statements or inflammatory statements that just really get you, and people like to pull your chain and do all those kind of things. It has nothing at all to do with that. Where is the emphasis? It is upon you. Whether you like that or not. And that's what James is saying here. We're not here to talk about all of these other things. We're here to talk about you. Every one of you. And the very first thing that he says is that you should be quick to listen. You should be quick to listen. What's that mean? Translated. It begs the question, does it not? Are you a good listener? Sadly, like patience, good listening skills are generally not one of our greatest gifts. And there are factors that I think influence this. Things like impulse control, personality, temperament, belief system, just to name a few. And I believe with all my heart that it takes effort and discipline to listen and process information that is shared. And not to be quick with regard to our reaction to things said or even things done. Sometimes, and this is a tough one, isn't it? Sometimes it means putting yourself in their position and analyzing where they are coming from. Now, granted, I'd be the first to say that sometimes that's difficult, because our tendency is to say, what? With regard to that. What in the world are you thinking, man? I don't know where you're coming from. I don't know what they're thinking. Well, that's a reaction. But by honestly assessing and processing data, and trying to put ourselves in their shoes sometimes helps with regard to listening carefully to what is being said and sometimes how it is being said. It also is assessing the worth or the value of statements made. And I think that's very important so that you can put a foundation underneath this and can be true to the analytical process in assessing what is valuable. A lot of you had the opportunity to be here last night with regard to this movie. And there was an excellent example of that. When he first started as a golfer, did he want to listen to anybody or what anybody had to say? No, he listened to himself, and his emotions and his anger got the better part of him. When he finally settled down and allowed the opportunity to work, he then began to listen. And what did he do in the process? Put a lock on it. And he began to respect. And he began to hear. And something valuable began to happen. And that's what the Lord James is saying to us, because there is a statement that is attached to this whole idea of good listening skills, and that is this. Do not be judgmental, even if they are. Listen carefully to what is being said. Because I have found, like you have found, that sometimes even people who grind their gears, people who rub us the wrong way, if you will listen carefully, sometimes there is something valuable to be had in the process. And if you can obtain something valuable and useful to you, even though it was said in a bad way, even though it seemed a little abrasive, then something good has come as a result of it. Do not be judgmental, even if they are. I believe it takes effort and discipline to listen and process information that is shared. Good listening skills always allows you. Good listening skills always allows you to formulate a plan of action. And if there was a lesson that I walked away with last night in watching that movie, it was that one. Formulate a plan of action as a result of, because I'm now listening, I'm paying attention, I am ready to be taught. Is that a skill that we zero in on? Not very often. Because in our world today, it's what? It's my way or the highway. Is that how this young man started last night? Oh, very much so. He didn't want to listen to his daddy. He sure didn't want to listen to God. And he didn't want to hear what anybody else had to say until he ran into that one who was able to give him information through a process of respect and of good listening skills. He finally gained the lesson, the very first lesson, by shutting up. Are we good at that? No, we're not. If we were to be truthful with each other, because we say, well, I'm not verbal about that. But boy, if we could put a speaker in your mind, whew, it would not be pretty. We call that being polite. That's being courteous. Well, I didn't say anything. Didn't know what our kids used to say to us? Well, I didn't say anything about that. You didn't have to. That was always my mother's favorite thing to do. It's written all over your face, man. It's all over your face. Wow. Our body language, our facial expressions. Does anybody have to say anything when people are going, what's that tell you? I didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. You didn't have to. God forbid do I say that happens between husbands and wives. It's Valentine's weekend. It's just love, isn't it, to express these wonderful things. And I'm sure that every wife out there would say that her husband is a fantastic listener. Listen. Good listening skills allows us to see things from a different perspective. And the reason that all of this and really zero in here, because one of the reasons why all of this is so very, very important is actually found in James' second solution-based fact here. He says, you be quick to listen, but let me throw a monkey wrench in this. And you also, it's talking to all of us now, you be slow to speak. I think the sensitivity level in this nation is growing out of control. People get offended with just about everything that is brought up. And James says, before you react, or before you say anything, listen, process, give it to the Lord, so that you may know how and why to answer or what to say. Now, if we were to again be perfectly honest with ourselves, we would all admit that usually this is the opposite of what we say or do. Developing a discipline to limit your reactions or your words, can I just say, will give you the appearance of being wise. You do not have to say a word in a controversial setting. And if mom ain't happy, you better not say a word. And I'm going to hear, listen, none of this, of what James is giving, this is the tougher part. This is why, let me just say, I think this is a passage so easy to listen to and say, okay, yeah, thanks, James. Yeah, I'm out of here, man. I can't do that. I'm not a good listener. I admit it. I always react first, and I just rifle out some thought or something. And I usually speak first and listen later. And we're going to get into the third part of this, and that just really throws a much larger monkey wrench in the whole equation. Because the truth is that sometimes, like wise advice, like good counsel, good biblical counsel, we don't want to hear it. Go talk to Bob. He needs this. Man, I don't need this. He needs it. And we forget the fact that the emphasis of this entire challenge has a finger pointing at you. You need to be quick to listen. You need to be slow to speak. We find it very hard to do sometimes. Because you see, let me just say that I believe it's our preference. This is the old typical, don't say that I can't. Let's just be honest about it and say I won't. Because our preference is to what? Fight fire with fire. Or that we might even say to somebody who is trying to be diplomatic about a situation, and we get highly offended when we say, how dare you? Or even worse, we say, who are you to give me advice? Even Jesus talked a little bit about that with the plank in somebody's eye and trying to take a splinter out of yours. Does any of this sound familiar to anybody this morning? I think this is a commonplace problem that we all face. And James is addressing all of this with a series of solution-based ideas. That none of this is particularly easy, but if you will put forth the effort with God beside you, with the help that is needed in allowing this to come true, then something great can begin to happen. And sometimes if we are not knowledgeable of a particular subject, or if we're having difficulty with this, then we should turn to those people. And we must not ever be in a position where the blind leads the blind. If you have a temper problem, Somebody who has a temper problem as well. Is that a person you should consult with regard to dealing with a temper? No, you're going to have a blast blasting everybody else and blasting the situations. And again, this starts to sound familiar in our world, in the workplace, in the schools. It's all around us. And for heaven's sakes, we're about ready to elect a president. Have you listened to any of these debates? Gee, wow. Wow. Really? What were you thinking, man? And that's really kind of the whole point. Do you really think there's a certain candidate who cares what you think? Not at all. And James says, you know, you are so distracted because you're putting all of these externals with a finger pointing at every one of them when I'm trying to help you understand this is talking to you. Are you listening? Are you really giving some thought to what you are about to say and how it would be said, or whether or not anybody invited you into this conversation? That's probably one of my biggest letdowns, one of my greatest faults. You know, somebody says something really off the wall, and you're sitting there vibrating, you know, because, man, I want to respond to this. But you weren't invited to that party. And you know good and well that if you say something with regard to that particular controversial situation, do you think it's going to help the situation? Probably not. Sometimes I've done it with humor and have enjoyed the moment. But it's hard. And I personally realize, and I've had some conversations with some of you about this. We say, you know, we talk about some of these challenges. Let me help you understand that the first challenge, when I look at these words, when I look at all of our series, the first challenge goes to me. I can identify with these problems. I can identify where James is coming from because I've struggled with these. And he says, in dealing with this in our series, he says, do you want some glue to put all this together so that we can get this right? Because the glue that really puts it all together is found in that third solution-based fact. I understand what it is to be a good listener. I understand that we should limit what we say. But what's that third one say? Wow. Slow to become angry. I do not need to tell you that there is plenty of things out in our world today that can make us hot and mad. And to hear news reports that can make us mad, and to hear politics that make us hot and mad, and to hear a variety of things that make us angry. And now here's what's crazy about all of this. In our mind, we think that this would range anywhere from justifiable anger to probably being a little bit nitpicky about it. Again, it doesn't seem like it takes much nowadays to set people off. But remember again that James is talking to you. Your anger or negative response to, and you name the subject, sets into motion the response of those around you. I think this has much to do with many other biblical lessons with regard to the roaring lion who sits and waits. And at times has looked even on church settings when people get nitpicky about certain things, only to observe subconsciously in your mind, and I've done this, Satan sitting out in the tree laughing his full head off. Man, look what I did there. Wow, that was so cool. Man, look how upset these people are. And he has a field day in dealing with our heads. but particularly as it pertains to anger, because that seems to be the triggering mechanism that gets people fired up. You either put another log on the fire, or you find solutions to the problem at hand. And let me just tell you that a calm demeanor and a solution-based opportunity, active listening, will almost always win the day. Now for Christian believers, as we start to put all this together and put a conclusion to this lesson is not only useful and helpful, but look at how he ends this. Verse 20. For one's anger does not bring about the righteous life that God desires. In the end analysis, pleasing the Lord should be what we desire. Period. Pleasing the Lord is what we should desire. Living a righteous life, despite what some may say, is still a model for others to observe. Meaning, people are watching you. You may not like that a whole lot. And sometimes in this whole process, that's kind of hard to swallow. Those of us who are in the public side, preachers, we've been there, done that. And we sometimes have said, how fair, that you're being judgmental here. And our reaction to anything, it seems to, people are watching. People are listening. And before you know it, wow, the expression on your face may show up in a newspaper. The words that you said may be taken out of context. And anything you say not only can and will be used against you by the court of public opinion, but particularly by those who are still on the fence. Because we're almost always going to hear, I thought you were a Christian. And it happens in every arena all across America. Whether you're in the public eye or not, people are watching you. So in the end analysis, pleasing the Lord will not only be our greatest desire, but living a righteous life, despite what anybody says, will then become a priority so that we model these very challenges in our words and in our deeds in our life. I believe that if we are to work at these three solution-based challenges, without question, I think it would be safe to say that life for each of us would be so much greater. All James is saying is this: I have led you to the water. Now you must decide whether you're going to drink or not. Pray with me. Lord, thank you for this simple challenge. Lord, it's so easy to let this float in one ear and right out the other. But Lord, there is a great challenge here. Because, Lord, it gives us the opportunity to listen to you. And Father, to put a limit on our impulses, our reactions as we rifle back responses sometimes in some very difficult situations. And Father, sometimes it would even be fair to say that we allow our anger to get the best of us. But Lord, this is not what you desire. And so, Father, we pray that you will help us in all situations, Father, to walk the walk and talk the talk. Father, to do what is necessary to be that role model to those around us. And for this, Lord, we thank you and we praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.